everybody. Hans Fenze coming to you from Highlands Ranch, Colorado.
Patrick Kelly coming to you from Tampa, Florida.
And welcome to our Millennial Gen X Boomer panel today. And we have representatives from all three generations. Thank you all for being a part of this call today. We're going to start with Mark, and we're going to go around and have everybody introduce your name, where are you today, your job, and what generation you represent.
Hey everybody, my name is Mark Fenze. As you can tell from the last name, I am Hans's son, and I am in Colorado Springs, Colorado at home, like probably all of you are. My title is Vice President of Digital Innovation at a nonprofit, and I'm technically in the millennial generation, although I would say I'm kind of right on the line for Gen X.
Hey, I'm George, and I'm coming to you from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm currently unemployed right now, and my generation is millennial.
Now, you're not unemployed. You're a full-time student.
Yeah, full-time student, yeah.
Don't underrate yourself. Okay, we'll go right to Cambria. It says Max Melkert on the screen, but that's Cambria Melkert.
Yes. Hi, I'm Cambria Melkert. I am also a child of Hans Fenze. In Cape Town, South Africa, I work for Youth with a Mission, which is an international Christian ministry, and I am a millennial.
Great. And Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Cullen, and I live in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, which is about halfway between Milwaukee and Madison, so America's Dairyland. And I am VP of HR and Marketing with a company called United States Alliance Fire Protection, and we do life safety work in Illinois and Wisconsin, and part of a large group out of Minnesota called API Group. And I answer to the shout of "Okay, Boomer."
And Brian also lives on a lake. I've been to his beautiful home up there. So Will, since we're talking about lakes, you go next.
Hi, my name is Will Smith, and I am a corporate jet pilot down here in sunny Florida. I am a X-Gener, and I'm also a published author.
All right. And Lena, we'll finish up with you.
So hi, good morning, good afternoon, depending on what zip code you are. I'm Lena Mendoza, founder of Intentional Leadership. I do leadership development. I am in San Jose, Silicon Valley, California, and I am a Gen Xer.
Wonderful. Thank you again, all of you, for being on the show today. And we're going to start with the millennials, which would, not Patrick, but we'll go Mark, George, Cambria. And first question is, when you think of baby boomers, what are your, maybe not just yours, but your generation's standard stereotype?
Sure, I can kick it off. And I did ask a couple of my friends who are also millennials, so kind of got their thoughts too. I would say some stereotypes of boomers is that they can tend to be more closed-minded and maybe stuck in their ways, not as willing to listen to new and different points of view. Is something that I think a lot of people would say in my generation. And another one is that I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but I think they can tend to be more likely to repeat misinformation they hear without really researching it. Like, I think a lot of the stuff that gets shared on Facebook that is maybe considered misinformation often originates from that generation.
Wow, that's cool.
I like that.
I like that. I've never heard that one. George, by the way, George grew up in Japan as an MK, so he's not your typical American millennial, but that's one reason I wanted him, because he is a college student. And George, how would you answer that question?
I would say some of our stereotypes are, we see boomers as very driven, very highly educated, but also very controlling, very prideful. I would even say arrogant, very legalistic, and sort of the formula of work. They're that sort of unwilling to move, unwilling to adapt. That's just how my generation kind of sees boomers a lot of the time.
By the way, Brian and I are not offended by anything you say, right, Brian?
I resemble that remark.
We'll just take these stabs in the heart with a big smile on our face.
And this is nothing
We
I
want-
believe, it's just
We want
my
everybody to be
generation.
brutally honest. So Cambria, you take it next.
Yeah, so I wrote down some thoughts. I feel that boomers are set in their ways. They are more rigid and inflexible than people of other generations. They like structure and routine. I find that they're a lot more blunt and they show less emotion and connection as people of my generation, and kind of like all business is kind of what I wrote down. So
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, Brian, my question to you, when you think of millennials, what are your stereotypes? Not only you, but your generation.
So the first words that come to mind are intolerant snowflakes. And then I think in terms of addicted to devices. So at a restaurant, you'll see 4 or 6 people sitting there looking at their devices and not communicating with each other. And I think overall it is, what word I would say after listening to you guys talk about boomers, touche.
Okay, well, thank you, Brian. I'm sure there's a lot more there, but Patrick, go ahead.
What happened to you, Hans? I put my do not disturb on, and my phone's been ringing. It's like it's ringing off. It's like it's ringing off the hook. I can't. And now it just froze. Like it just froze on me. So perfect example of adapting and pivoting this time. But I've never seen my phone ring a bunch of times and then just go completely dead on me. So Facebook Live is now off for me. I don't know what happened, so I apologize. I apologize for that because I was trying to make sure our Facebook Live was still streaming, but we are not anymore. So Hans, please make sure that we're all tagged in this because my Facebook Live is not streaming anymore. All right, and we can edit a lot of this out too. Just remember that. Where are we?
Patrick, you're going to ask the Gen Xers their first question.
Whew, I almost started sweating, everyone. I mean, whew, geez, good thing. All right, so let's talk to Gen Xers. This is Lena and Will. So this is great. So the Gen Xers always feel like they're stuck in the middle, and I get this all the time. I've had conversations with both Will and Lena about this specific subject, and it was interesting because everybody's got a different perspective, but all Gen Xers normally have a very same perspective on this. So, we'll start with Lena first, but tell us why, or if you feel stuck in the middle of these two massive generations between the boomers and the millennials.
I definitely feel stuck. So I grew up as I guess I've never heard of the term MK as a military kid. So I definitely had a lot of that structure and, that this is kind of how life is. And these are the parameters, stay within the box. And, but I have a millennial spirit, if I can say, because I like creativity. I love innovation. I love new opportunities. And so I feel very stuck. And so I shared that I studied why millennials were not hired and why they were fired, right? So how they're hired and why they were fired. And there was a very strong correlation. And so that's what I would do is teach that in my courses in college so that I could keep millennials hired and married or in partnership for a very long time. And actually that same goes across the board for every generation. So I do feel stuck because I feel like I have to wear a suit, but I really want to wear a baseball hat. So, I like organizations that are definitely flexible to personality, and they really look more at your competitive intelligence and more at your heart and how you serve.
All right, Will.
My turn?
Yeah.
Well, I look at it like this. I was listening to both sides of the millennials and the boomers, and I don't think it's, the old saying goes, as you get older, you get stuck in your ways. I don't think that's a generation thing. I just think as the millennials grow up and become older, they're going to be stuck in their ways too, just like the boomers. What I do see, there's a lack of respect from the millennials because they're entitled and they think somebody owes them something. And they don't understand that, nothing comes for free in life and you have to work for it. And I see this going back and forth. My son is a millennial. And to give a quick example, the way I told them to get up off their butts and start working is I sold my house and kicked them out. My son went into the Army and my oldest son went in the Army. My youngest son went and lived with mommy. But sometimes you have to be a little hard. So I don't know if I'm more of a leaning on the boomer side or more the millennial side, but I just see a lot of entitlements there. And for some reason, they think somebody owes them something.
Interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So do you, like I said, do you feel like you're stuck in the middle? Because I know you were raised by builders, you told me. Your parents weren't boomers, they were builders. So do you feel more that you are a boomer and you're not stuck in the middle like a lot of other Gen Xers feel, or do you still feel that you are?
Well, I mean, I was raised by a mother that worked 3 jobs to support me. And my dad was, he was more of a business guy, and it was always business first. Very serious, with what was going on. It was one of those things. I didn't see him a whole lot, but I was raised with everybody worked.
Yeah.
There was no, and that's why I wrote one of my second book was about, you got to get up and make things happen. But as far as being stuck in the middle from a work aspect, everybody I fly around are boomers. All the corporate jobs with Outback Steakhouse, R&R Tire, these guys are all boomers, and they've worked really, really hard to get where they are, and they deserve it. And because it took a while, I think the millennials think that they need to go to work for 5 years and be in the same position as boomers. This is a lifetime thing when you're out there working. It takes you 30 years before you retire, doing a career. It doesn't happen overnight. And for some reason, I think the millennials are entitled to think, well, they just, bounce around. They'll work 5 years, and they need to have or expect to have the same thing the boomers have over a lifetime of work.
All right.
And I just don't. I don't think it's.
I mean, I trust me, I get it. So back to the question. I'm going to jump back to Lena then. So which 2 generations, Lena, do you feel you relate to the best then in the work environment, and then maybe / the life environment right outside of work?
So as I grew up, I would say I definitely was more of a baby boomer mentality, very strict and more rigid and business first. And so I definitely had to cultivate that social, like that emotional intelligence, and as time went on and really. So what I say, lead with a compassionate heart. And so now I feel like I'm more like a millennial. I've worked with a lot of millennials. I feel that they bring a lot to the table. They think differently. I think we each think differently generationally. And so for me, my personality would say I want to have fun more and wear Disney ears. So so I would say now I would probably lean more to the millennial side. I'm 44, by the way.
So you changed a little bit, right? You said started with boomers and now acting more or kind of trending towards millennials. Awesome. What about you, Will? I mean, are you best with generation millennial, or are you more of a boomer, or more just an
He sure sounded like a boomer with the last
Boomer,
thing he said, right?
No, and then because that's how I was raised, So I was 73. And also agree with Hans about, are you, what part of that? Because that's 20 years or 15 years. So if you were born as a millennial in the 80s, you probably have more of a trait towards the X-Gens or boomers, because that's who you're raised by. But if you're born in a later part of that generation, like 98 or 99, then maybe your parents were a little bit different. So, I mean, 20 years is a huge time per generation. So I think me being in the 73, I lean more towards the boomers, because that's basically how I was raised. My parents had me in their 40s. So
we talked about that too. You were a later child in life. So that's awesome. So we got 2 Xers now, that one is a boomer mentality, right? And one is now a millennial mentality. So we've got both sides of the spectrum in the middle, right? But they're still on both sides representing each generation. So that's very interesting. Would you say, Hans?
I would. And let me just remind everybody that's watching, the reason Patrick and I wrote MillennialBOOM was to try to bridge understanding and to create more unity, because we see a lot of discord. When I met Patrick on an airplane flying to China, the first thing he told me after we got to spend 5 minutes talking, said, generally I hate baby boomers. And I said, really? Why? You guys are a bunch of jerks, and I have to work with you, and I don't like it, and you just condemn me and all this stuff. So we're going to go to the next question. So we wrote this book to try to alleviate that misunderstanding and to help boomers get inside the head and heart of millennials and vice versa. So we're going to go back to the millennials, and we'll start with you, Cambria, and then George, and then Mark. Here's a second question to you. What are some barriers you've encountered working with boomers?
So I immediately thought about when I was working in an office for the ministry we work with, Youth with a Mission, and all of my colleagues were boomers. And I think what I found was that they just didn't take me very seriously, and they were hesitant to pass on their knowledge to me because it felt like they were going to become irrelevant or I would take their place in some way. So it just didn't feel like a very cohesive relationship. Like I wasn't respected or taken seriously. I felt like they kind of were like wanting to baby me a little bit and just really holding tight on to what they knew and not wanting to pass it on to me. So
we hear that. Yeah, we hear that a lot. RESPECT, and the lack of respect. That I appreciate that very much, because we hear that. That's the first thing I heard from Patrick. You guys just don't respect us. You don't think we have anything to contribute. How about you, George? How would you answer that question?
I would say one of the biggest barriers I've seen is when technology is entering the workplace. Some of my jobs I've had, boomers have had a harder time adjusting and adapting to that change. And that's kind of slowed the process of that change a little bit. So that's probably one of the biggest barriers I've seen.
Anything else?
Kind of building off of what she said, I think that just the whole attitude towards millennials, that they see us as someone who's lesser than, someone who's less educated, less determined, less driven. And that kind of discourages me from trying a little bit more than I could. And it's very hurtful, and it creates bitterness and tension between the generations, I would say.
Yeah. Thanks. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, first of all, I would say I actually feel like I work really well with boomers, and I haven't had a lot of issues working with them in my career. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an old soul and tend to feel more comfortable with people older than myself. But I had a similar thought to what George said. You know, part of my job as a digital innovator is to bring new technologies and tools to the workplace. And I've definitely found the boomer generation slower to adapt to new tools and maybe not as understanding of how much benefit those tools can provide as they replace old tools. Like, for example, Slack is such a better way to communicate than email, but I found that boomer generation kind of the slowest to adapt to tools like Slack.
Yeah, for sure.
I've never even heard of Slack.
No,
Neither have I.
It's a good tool. Hey, Hans,
But we do say only boomers use email and builders. What were you going to say, Patrick?
I was going to say, we said that earlier yesterday when Hans said email me, but you know, I'm going to jump in as the millennial here because I just pretty much related to everybody on this. And I wanted to say that, you know, even myself, as Hans, when you and I met, I owned my own business. I was doing my own thing. And even I had that issue. When I was going in, I pitched all types of people, from the Walmarts of the world all the way to large retailers across the globe. And I would hear all the time from these boomers, "You'll get there, kid. Yeah, we'll give you a little bit here. We'll give you some pallet orders, give you a little bit to munch on. But once you've been in the industry for 20 years, you'll get it. You'll really get it." And you know, what's funny, what George was saying, you know, it really kind of hurts you overall. You start to think to yourself, wait a minute, should I not even be here? Should I not be trying to do this? Because all they're telling me is do what you're told, blah, blah, blah. And to us, it's like, I started my own company and I still didn't even get the respect of owning a multi-million-dollar international company, right? And even, I would say even till today, we still have a lot of boomers working. And it's crazy how that respect from both sides even gets me to this day. And it makes me say, well, should I even do that? Who knows?
Well, Patrick, can I jump in on this real quick and comment about that?
Sure.
Okay, if you're an NFL player, you have to play football in high school and junior high and college before you become an NFL player. You don't just go straight from mini league straight to the NFL. So the same thing as far as business is concerned. You know, when you're in the industry, you have to work up to that 20 years. You have to give the respect to that person that's put his time in and, you know, and paid his dues. Just like a pilot. I didn't go from a private pilot to a corporate pilot. I had to pay my dues. And that's what the millennials don't get. They don't want to pay their dues. They just want it all right now.
You know, it is interesting, and I've totally hear you on that. And it's always funny, but if I'm an entrepreneur and an innovator, and, you know, like I said, if you're the guy going to work and punching in and doing what you're told, and you've gotten there for doing what you're told for 20 years, that's fine. But as I'm an innovator and entrepreneur, I'm looking at ways to better your company, better your organization, and do things that you've never been able to do, which is why you're probably giving me crumbs. So I get the longevity, the respect, but in certain industries, I don't believe that's even there anymore. If you've got the talent and the experience, you can move forward.
Yeah, Patrick, before we finish up this segment, I'd like to hear from the three millennials about that pay your dues statement.
Please, yeah. Mark.
Actually, I have to say I totally agree with what Will said. I think there is a tendency for our generation to want everything our parents have now, but want it now, like 20, 30 years earlier. And I think that is a very real issue, that millennials can tend to not want to pay their dues, to do the lower menial jobs, to, you know, have a small starter home before they move up to a nicer home and all that kind of stuff. So I think you're absolutely spot on.
Anybody else? Cambria, George?
I think when you said that millennials have this sort of entitlement personality perspective, I think that's true, but I also think the boomers have that as well, but in a different way. I think that the whole I've done all this work and I've earned this position, you should respect me. I think that's a little bit of entitlement as well. I feel like that whole, because of my age, you need to respect me, you need to honor me, which is true. We should do that. We should respect our elders. We should look for that mentorship. But I feel like that whole coming in with that whole demanding attitude, I feel like that's a little bit entitled.
That's awesome. Hey, Patrick, you want to wrap up this first segment? And then
only unless Cambria doesn't.
Brian, you'll be the first up in segment 2. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, Cambria, you want to say it?
Yeah, just quickly. I just wanted to say, I think what we're lacking is just like the connection. I kind of alluded to it with the stereotypes of boomers, is that I feel like there's less willingness to connect. And I feel like what we need is for boomers to look to the millennials and say, what do you have to offer, and make space for that. But that doesn't mean that we can't work our way up to us, you know, earning our dues, paying our dues, whatever. But like looking at one another and seeing what we bring to the table, I think is really what we're missing. And I do wish that the boomers that I work with would kind of look at us with curiosity of like, okay, you're not just these entitled brats, but like, what do you actually bring?
Yeah.
What innovation, what new ideas, what new technology can you teach us about? You know, so it's just kind of a curiosity and a willingness to connect.
I love that. Hey, by the way, those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, would you just hit your share button if you're into what we're doing? We're going to stop this first segment, but we're going to keep going on Facebook Live. But hit your share button if you're watching on YouTube. If you would like this, we would love it. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, so Lena, we're going to get to you next too as well. I know you've got something, write it down. But everybody, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back at you.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out my books and other resources at hansfenzel.com.